The Idries Shah Foundation podcast. Practical psychology for today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, narrated by David Ault. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. In this edition of the podcast, we will hear selections from Sufi Thought and Action by Idries Shah. This audio is made available by the Idries Shah Foundation. Sufi Spiritual Rituals and Beliefs. Object of Sufi Teaching. The object of Sufi spiritual teaching can be expressed as to help to refine the individual's consciousness so that it may reach the radiances of truth from which one is cut off by ordinary activities of the world. The term used for illuminations or radiances is anwar. Mysticism is not magic. It is a misunderstanding as, for instance, the book Zaya al-Qulub, among many others, emphasizes, to think that a mystic either desires, or can achieve, identification with God, in the sense of acquiring divine attributes or powers. Such a concept belongs to magical, not mystical, thinking. In common parlance, as well as in the minds of many who should know better, mystical is bracketed with mystery and mystification in the senses of something confusing or difficult to understand. These secondary meanings, of course, are only due to unconscious illiteracy. Sufis require the reduction of the effects of material attributes, those things which stand in the way of higher understanding. Many things which repetitious or oversimplified religion presents as spiritual are, when examined, found to be simply aspects of materiality. One example is emotionalism. Common distortions in religious thought. However widespread and familiar they may be, many presentations of religion are abbreviated and distorted versions of something of which the original is not known to current practitioners. The outlines can be discerned, more often than not, and examples of some parts of these are given later. A regression to primitive thinking and the desire for order, never far from the human mind and often, not always, useful, are the chief culprits. Where the primitive feeling is allied to equally primitive logic, we get a familiar distortion, the belief that if things material are obstacles, then killing or suppressing the material should lead to enlightenment. Yet this, far from being useful, is essentially magical thinking. Omar Khayyam has pointed out this fallacy when, echoing the foolish, he writes, "If wine is the enemy of religion, I shall devour the enemy of religion." Quite understandably, this phrase has been misinterpreted due to the narrow mentality of literalists. They have imagined that Khayyam is himself deriding religion. The poet is a humorist. Literalists often, perhaps always, lack this capacity. Self-mortification, far from producing liberation from material things, is far more likely to cause either an unhinged mind, delusions, or a masochistic taste for more suffering, experienced, of course, as joy. Escape from the insulation from truth. Polishing the mirror or removing the dust are terms in Sufic use, referring to the process of liberation from those elements, natural and acquired, with which the world insulates humanity from the greater truth. Sufis, far from being able to build on the mentality of conditioned beliefs, generally have to help detoxify the mind from harmful, deadening, or other imaginedly important illusions, fixations, or emotion-based ideas. That which is capable of perceiving objective reality is, in Sufism, the human soul, ruh. Materiality is the term employed for that which weighs down the soul. The soul is conceived of as a part of a single sea, a sea of peace, on which the surface of which ripples, waves, and storms constitute the effects of materialism, attachment to objects, and negative thought. Speaking of the primordial unity of being, Rumi, in the first book of his Mathnavi, says, "We were extensive, and we were all one substance. Without head or foot we were, all one head. We were all one substance, like sunshine. Without knots we were, and clear like water." Penetration of pride into religion. Materialism, attachment to things of the world, includes pride. Many religious people suffer from pride, taking pleasure or even delight in being good or religious. In ordinary religious circles, it is so common for no real distinction to be made between spiritual people and the self-deceived that what a teaching such as Sufism offers on this point has been considered vital as a constant reminder and corrective. The most prideful dislike this reminder most. As a consequence, following a common pattern, they attack the Sufis, not their own problem. Their problem is one which psychologists have long recognized, but when subsumed in rhetoric or theology, it tends to escape analysis. Ranging from shrugging off to deeply ingenious malevolence, its consequences reduce the likelihood of correct information circulating. Considerable hostility can be engendered experimentally to demonstrate this malaise. I have, for example, more than once unnerved specialists by telling them jokes, and delighted others of their kind by providing an appearance of what it is at the moment fashionable to call gravitas. Everyone is familiar with sanctimonious people, suffering from the effects of materialism, and also with those who have such pride, and are therefore in Sufic terms not spiritual people at all, that they imagine that they alone are right, or that their form of belief alone is absolutely true. In a seeming paradox dealing with intellectuals, the Sufi poet Mirza Abdul Qadir Bedil insists that real knowledge is greater than the mechanical sort, and that even the unregenerate may eventually reach it if they find the path. You are better than anything your intellect has understood, and you are higher than any place your understanding has reached. The Sufi affirms that he perceives the reality beyond outward form, in contrast to those who merely fix upon form. Form is useful, but it is secondary. As the great Sufi exponent Ibn al-Arabi puts it in his Interpreter of Desires, "My heart has become able to take on any form, a grazing ground for gazelles, a Christian monastery of monks, an idol house of the pagans, the Islamic pilgrims' Mecca mosque, the tablets of the Jewish Torah and the Quran's pages. I follow the faith of love, wherever its riding mounts face. That is my religion and my faith." This passage illustrates, quite dramatically, that the mystic has a religion and a faith totally different from that professed by those wedded to externals, externals which, to the ignorant, are the religion. The Sufi way is through knowledge and practice, not through intellect and talk. As Prince Dara Shikoh says in a Persian poem, "Do you wish to be included with the lords of sight? From speech, then, pass on to experience. By saying unity, you do not become a monotheist. The mouth does not become sweet from the word sugar." There are those who believe that the attainment of the perception of truth can be carried out by unaided effort. They imagine that by unswerving dedication to certain practices, by adherence to rules which are laid down by experimenters or are really only fragmentary, one can complete, or get some way along, the journey of the soul. But one may say something and yet not be able to do it. Try, for instance, lifting yourself up by the bootstraps. Studying appropriate parts of some literature can provide a basis. It can be an essential prerequisite, a preparation. Beyond a certain point, however, as with every other specialization, someone must diagnose, someone must prescribe, and the prescription must be properly carried out. Some useful counterthinking to the magical attitude has indeed been done. If there are magical procedures, why the variety of formulations? If the path has been laid down, why the successive appearance of different teachers? Why would anyone reinvent the wheel if everything were as cozy and sequential as primitive longing so easily convinces us? Constant reformulation, repeatedly bringing the teaching back to its center of gravity, is so consistent a pattern that those who have overcome greed and narcissism enough have learned from the pattern's existence that this is central. It is revealing of the mentality of many would-be metaphysicians that, when faced by this statement, they so often clamor for the stage after reading or formal study, instead of applying to a Sufi to discover whether they are yet fit for further development, and whether their study has been along the right lines, or whether reading and familiarization with certain concepts has been adequate. Jalaluddin Rumi speaks of the line towards truth, leading to the dot which is truth, in his Mathnavi. The knowledge of the truth is a point, and the wisdom of the Sufi a line. From the existence of the point is the being of a line. Confusion of both the scholars and the popularizers. Scholars and popularizers alike, relying on observation or records of specific Sufi procedures and trying to assess the Sufi development system, have lumped these together and imagined them to be constants. But this approach is ineffective. It renders both narrative and academic materials useless. The scholars and other outward observers do not discriminate between real and impoverished procedures, between essential and local or time-centered practices or concepts. They cannot either see the personal element, how the student may vary from time to time in potential or attitude. It is easy to see how this misunderstanding has arisen. The mentality and methods of scholasticism and linear thinking have been employed to approach something which is of a completely different nature. The Sufi Guide. The aspirant has to be guided by a mentor. The stage at which this guidance can take effect is seldom, if ever, perceptible to the learner. Those who say, "I am ready to learn," or "I am not ready to learn," are as often mistaken as they are correct in their surmise. Yet the aspirant must try, neither thinking that he is nothing nor trying to sit on a throne. I found this couplet in the Persian text of Rumi's Letters. If you cannot sit on a throne like a king, seize, like a tent pitcher, the rope of the royal tent. The Sufis are unanimous that a guide, or sheikh, is absolutely essential, though never available on demand. The Sufis are not merchants. Many Sufis are not guides. As with any other specialization, teaching is a vocation, open only to those who are truly capable of discharging its functions. A Sufi may be carrying out functions in the world which are not perceptible to others. He, or she, may be of a higher rank than a teacher, and yet have no teaching mission. The very concept that the teacher is the highest stage of human being is taken from somewhere other than Sufism. Sufis do not exist only to lead others to enlightenment. Where they have a hierarchical function, this is for purposes other than teaching. Perhaps it is the never far distant human feeling of self-importance that assumes that the Sufi teacher is the greatest human being. If the assumption is that the individual is the most important thing there is, and that no other function than his or her well-being exists, then we can understand this unfounded assumption. Some hold that the Sufi way is not distinct from that of Islam, but that it follows the esoteric meaning of the Quran, of which the exoteric meaning is in the overt text. Hence Ghazali or Abu Hanifa, the founder of one of the major Islamic orthodox schools, could be both Muslim and Sufis at the same time. Some Sufi writers draw attention to the non-time-bound nature of Sufism. Before man was, we were. And none regard Sufi thought as absent from any legitimate religious framework. There are many mystical passages in the Muslim holy book, as well as in the traditions of the Prophet. One is, "We are nearer to him, man, than his jugular vein." Another, "He is with you wherever you are," and "He is in your own souls, you do not perceive him." Those are general statements, but Sufi exponents draw attention to Surah 18 for a close analogy with Sufi teaching and teachers. In this chapter, a teacher with special knowledge, whom many call Al-Khidr, the wandering guide, meets Moses and teaches him that there are meanings in life beyond appearances, a classical Sufi contention. Moses asks to be taught the truth, but the man answers, "You will not be able to have patience with me." Moses, however, persists and undertakes to obey the stranger in everything. They start on a journey, just as the Sufis call the following of the path a journey, with the compact of obedience and patience, and that Moses will ask no questions. First they come to a boat, which the teacher scuttles. Moses asks why he should do this, since it might drown the people in it. "Truly, thou hast done a strange thing." The guide replies, "Did I not tell thee that thou canst have no patience with me?" The text continues. Moses said, "Rebuke me not for forgetting, nor grieve me by raising difficulties in my case." Then they proceeded until, when they met a young man, he slew him. Moses said, "Hast thou slain an innocent person who had slain none? Truly a foul thing hast thou done." The teacher answered, "Did I not tell thee that thou canst have no patience with me?" Moses again agreed to keep silent, adding that if he were to question any of his mentor's acts in the future, he could cast Moses aside. Then they proceeded, until, when they came to the inhabitants of a town, they asked them for food, but they refused them hospitality. They found there a wall on the point of falling down, but he set it up straight. Moses reproached his teacher with helping those who had been unkind, for he could not contain himself. The mysterious teacher said, "This is the parting between me and thee. Now will I tell the interpretation of that over which thou wast unable to hold patience." He explained that the boat belonged to poor people. By rendering it unserviceable, sinking it below the water, he had ensured that a usurping king who was seizing all boats would not find it. when the tyrant had gone away, the poor men would be able to salvage their boat and earn their living with it. The youth, if spared, would have grown up to be a danger to others. As for the wall, it belonged to two youths, orphans in the town. There was beneath it a buried treasure to which they were entitled. Their father had been a righteous man, so thy Lord desired that they should attain their age of full strength and get out their treasure. I did it not of my own accord. Such is the interpretation of that over which thou wast unable to hold patience. This metaphor conveys precisely the way in which the Sufi teacher carries on his function in life. Note that the disciple, if he is unable to keep up with his master, will have to be dismissed. However much he tries, he will remain at his own level. Theologians might argue that Moses has to be an illuminate in order to carry out a prophetic function, and pass on divine commands relating to spiritual practices and worldly behavior, the essence of familiar religion. But such would only be those who accept mysticism. To many orthodox theologians in most religions, mysticism is anathema. As the Akhlaq-i Mohsini has it, the bird which has no knowledge of pure water has his beak in salt water all year round. Pure water is a technical term with a specific meaning among the Sufis. When they hear or read this story, a proportion of people will always wonder, inwardly or otherwise, why they should trust a teacher to such an extent. Some will question whether they should trust at all. The Sufis' answer to this is simply that without such trust, no learning is possible. Hussein Wais Kashifi, in the Lights of Canopus, says, "The person who has not seen the face of trust has seen nothing. The person who has not found contentment has found nothing." Some writers have gone further in explaining. The human being, whether he realizes it or not, is trusting someone or something every moment of the day. He trusts the floorboards not to collapse, the train not to crash, the surgeon not to kill him, and so on. But, one might answer, we trust these people and these things because we have reason to believe that they will not let us down. But that, say the Sufi supporters, is exactly the position in Sufism. Only unthinking, heedless people fail to observe it. Sufis traditionally dwell among those whom they teach, living good lives as people of probity, acting according to their words, fulfilling undertakings, until, as with the floorboards, the train, or the surgeon, they have earned a sufficient degree of trust from those who come in contact with them. According to the nature of the individuals among whom their lot is cast, this time put in by the Sufis will vary. None of them complains if it is measured in decades, though the would-be learners may complain. The latter, like Moses, may lack patience when only this will overcome their suspiciousness. If the teacher does not dismiss them, they effectively dismiss themselves. One cannot learn from someone whom one distrusts. Yet plenty of people, again perhaps because of self-flattery, follow those whom they do not entirely trust. To the Sufi, such people may be followers. They cannot, in that condition, be pupils. Need of the learner to learn how to learn. The Sufis have some striking allegories designed to indicate both the path and the situation of humankind when ignorant of the path. How, for instance, does the Sufi see the ordinary individual trying to make his or her way through life? One saga dealing with this view from another world is found in a succession of short tales about Mullah Nasruddin, playing the part of the human being who makes sense of the world, as we all do, while the reality is very different. Nasruddin is a foolish youth, whose mother sends him to market to sell a bolt of cloth which she has woven. On the way to the town, Nasruddin meets another traveller, and they are soon deep in conversation. The young man's words are so unrealistic that the other man realizes that he can fool him. "Give me that cloth. You don't need it for yourself, do you?" he says. Nasruddin thinks that he is clever. "Not so fast, friend. My mother told me to sell it, as she needs the money. We are poor folk, you know. It would not be a responsible act just to give it away." "Very well," says the man. "I'll give you 20 silver pieces for it. I haven't got the money on me, but you can have it next time we meet." 20 pieces of silver. This seems a great opportunity to Nasruddin, for his mother had told him that 3 silver pieces would be the most he could hope to get. "You can have it then," says Nasruddin, adding, with great cunning, "although I am robbing myself," something he has heard merchants say when concluding a deal. "I'll be off then," says the other man. "Stop," says Nasruddin, for another thought has occurred to him. "I have to know your name, so that I can find you again." "That's easy," says the other. "It's me. That's who I am." Nasruddin, pleased with his day's work, goes home and tells his mother what has happened. "All I have to do is to find me, and he will pay me." "Foolish boy," says his mother. "Everybody is called me. You are me to yourself, I am me to me, and that man is me as well." "That's too complicated for me," Nasruddin tells her. "But I'll go out tomorrow and find me, and he'll pay me." The following day Nasruddin sets out again, and halfway to the market he comes across a man sitting in the shade of a tree. Now, being rather dim-witted, Nasruddin has forgotten what the man who had his cloth looks like. This man, he thinks, may well be the one, so he decides to test him to make sure. "Who are you?" he asks the man. The other man does not appreciate this direct approach and waves him away. "None of your business. Get on your way." Nasruddin, coached by his mother, believes that one should always give a civil answer to a question. The man is behaving badly. Nasruddin picks up a large rock and holds it over the traveller. "Who are you? I think you are me." "All right," the man answers, nervously. "If you like, I'm me." "I thought you were. Now, give me the 20 silver coins." Convinced that Nasruddin is a dangerous lunatic, the man quickly throws down 20 silver pieces and runs away, glad to escape with his life. It is noteworthy that Nasruddin is generally ignored or deplored by scholars, and heartily disliked by pompous clerics, who lack a sense of humour. In this tale, however, the discerning reader is able to taste something of the Sufi's overview of life, thought and behaviour, as he experiences the absurdity of assumptions in action. A word often used for the aspirant is seeker or salik. Those who, through practicing Sufic exercises or otherwise concerned with Sufic matters, are not at the end of the path, cannot call themselves Sufis. Sufi is the name for the realized human being. In the Sufic phrase, he who calls himself a Sufi is not one. Yet the world swarms with people who call themselves Sufis. They have been numerous for centuries. This podcast is copyright 2018, the Idries Shah Foundation.